Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Manabhartiyam channel. Over the past few weeks, we have been studying one book called Sultana's Dream, a Feminist Utopia. This book was initially authored by Rokeya Sakhawat Hossain in Bengali. So she was a Bengali writer those days in East Bengal, and then sometimes, for some years she was there in West Bengal also. Her husband was an ICS officer those days during the British era. So now that particular place is called Bangladesh. So it became East Pakistan and now Bangladesh. So we have completed about 4 episodes. I believe this is the 5th episode. We'll be finishing this book and then we can discuss it later. We have Sikshardhi with us. Hi Sikshardhi, how are you?
Hello sir, how are you sir?
I am fine, absolutely. So this book, would you like to start it?
Yes sir, absolutely.
Yes, please.
Yeah. All right sir. So guys, we have completed quite a bit of the book. Almost 80% of the book is completed, and we are at page 80 of this book. Right. The question of honor. Family status and family honor are inextricably tied up with parda, as they are throughout the world with matters of women's being and doing. But honor takes on a special salience in many Muslim populations around the globe. Proverbs express this well. Among the Pathans of northwest Pakistan, for instance, it is said that a woman is known by the qualities of his wife. A man is known by the qualities of his wife. Another way of putting this, among the Muhammadan tribal clans referred to as Pakhtuns living along the Afghan border in Pakistan, is that the Pakhtun's honor is tied to that of his women who exist to serve him and be loyal to his cause. It is a man's world, and Pakhtuns will not compromise their concept of women. Ideal women learn only to run a household. Hamida Khala, an elderly Muslim friend, remembered that in her youth it was a matter of great pride for a man to be able to say, "My wife is so pure that no man has seen even the hem of her veil." And among the high-status Muslim families who care for an important Muslim saint's shrine in the Delhi area, women told the anthropologist Patricia Jeffrey that the men like parda because of izzat, which translates in English to honor. She concluded that the seclusion of women was important to the men's work as keepers of the shrine because it showed that they were highly observant, strict Muslims. The theme of honor, often coupled with the concept of shame, runs through the moral ideas of many societies, particularly around the Mediterranean Sea, Western Asia, Northern Africa, and is also found in Southern Asia in connection with parda. All these areas were conquered back in the Islamic invasion period, right? And was forcefully pushed this parda system into their respective societies with blade, not with words, and is also found in Southern Asia in connection with parda. It is a powerful concept that has been extensively discussed in anthropological studies but almost always from the male perspective. In her study of Bedouins, the anthropologist Leela Abu Lughod offers sensitive new insights into this issue. She traces the relationships among veiling, modesty, and sexuality in a society unlike many in South Asia, where independent action by men is highly valued, and concludes that separate paths to honor exist, appropriate to the socially and economically independent on the one hand and to the dependent on the other. The honor of voluntary deference is the moral virtue of dependence in Bedouin society. Separate paths to honor exist, appropriate to the socially and economically independent on the one hand and to the dependent on the other. Oh. This point sheds new light on the matter of honor and parda observance. For instance, so they are making their own conclusions. It is what I am getting from here. I mean, they are looking at only certain points which they want. What we say is cherry picking. They are not looking at a system as a whole. So, as it goes, this point sheds new light on the matter of honor and parda observance. For instance, one might imagine that making men's honor entirely dependent on women's actions, as in the statements noted earlier, gives women considerable power over men's derivative honor. A woman might threaten to ruin a man's reputation by disobedience, but it does not work out that way for several reasons. First, a man's honor is terribly important to him. In some groups, it is the most cherished attribute, one for which he may be ready to die or to kill. Men have physical and legal power over women. Stop with them. They initiate divorce and can send women back to their families. Depending on the specific type of Islamic personal law in force in a country, women may also be able to initiate divorce. Recent legislation in some countries also limits men's power to initiate unilateral divorce. But this is unheard of in those groups where violence is used to defend family honor. Men in such groups often beat women, and in extreme cases, their concern for personal and family honor may prompt them to kill a female relative who has violated the group's code of conduct. Such killings, like crimes of passion elsewhere, are condoned by the community. Second, women themselves may be imbued with the code of honor. Among the Pakhtuns studied by the anthropologist Akbar Ahmad, women are paradoxically the most fanatic supporters of the Pakhtun code. Ahmad reports a couplet in which a woman exhorts a male to uphold the code at the cost of his life and her happiness. Although these ideas and actions sound paradoxical, the explanations for them are not difficult, especially in view of Abu Lughod's analysis. Respect in this community is vital to the family status and in all societies has both symbolic and material implications. Since women are entirely dependent on the family for survival, especially where the rules of parda limit labor force participation, their own interests demand that they do what they can to advance the collective interests of the family. Strict parda observance, in addition, is a way for women to gain respect from others in the family and community, as obedience and conformity are highly valued in these societies. Most critical to the concept of honor, however, are the implications for hierarchical relationships in family and society. The classic posture of deference to a superior not only assures relative safety for the inferior partner, but also offers the only available claim for excellence within the hierarchical system. Seen from this perspective, the issue of honor provides men with extraordinary power to control female behavior precisely because men are passionately concerned with safeguarding their derivative honor. Far from giving women any power to affect male behavior, honor becomes a burden. Far from giving women any power to affect male behavior, honor becomes a burden, a harness with which a bridle with which to bridle women. Men's passion to preserve their honor, often equated with manliness, becomes a passion to control women. This is the passion that can break out into acts of violence, as when men feel their personal honor threatened by the actions of women. In another sense, the passion to control women breaks out into other kinds of violence against women, as when writers and leaders of social or political movements invoke the fear of sexual anarchy in a whole society as justification for the imposition of parda and other constraints on women. The apparently voluntary nature of parda observance must always be examined in terms of the choices open to women in a given situation. Voluntary deference to superiors may well be the moral virtue of dependence and may represent the best available choice, but it indicates a society in which women are kept tightly within bounds and grievously punished for non-conformity. So, what I observe is here in this particular essay, they are just cherry picking what they want, and they have written only the points which they want to observe and which they want to highlight. Right, next, encounter with parda. It is hard to imagine what it might be like to live in parda. There are physical constraints covering one's face and body some of the time, avoiding certain men all of the time, staying in certain places, and so on. But these are rules that can be taught and learned. What is much harder to imagine is how women learn and teach the feelings that make it seem right to do these things. And that, of course, is the question one has to ask about any code of conduct in any family or group or society. This question has haunted me for some time, but it took a while for it to float to the surface. When I first met veiled women in the streets of Karachi, Pakistan in the 1950s, I was very angry. How dare they do this to women? I thought, not stopping to think in my anger just who they might be or how the women themselves felt about it. In those days, a few years after independence from British colonial rule and the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947, I spent a lot of time in the poorer sections of the city near the big old markets and the port, getting to know the place and deciding how I was going to do my dissertation research. At that time, it didn't occur to me It didn't occur to me to do research on Parda. The study of women was not yet an acknowledged part of social science, especially at Harvard. where I was a graduate student. I hadn't yet learned to listen to myself, to hear what most interested me in a place that I found fascinating. Parda. Lots of women on the streets in that part of town, but most of them encased in a billowing cloak, the burqa, black or white, that covered a woman entirely, including her face. The women moved in twos or threes usually, sometimes with a man, often with children. Crossing the busy streets, they were hesitant, sometimes lifting a corner of the face veil to peer at the traffic. There was something about these women that bothered me very much and contributed to my anger. Why should they why should this woman be angry? It is their choice. Why is she uh, getting angry? Even nowadays we see, if you ask the people who wear parda or burqa to stop practicing that parda, they wouldn't do so, right? See, this is what all feminists, I mean, they will point out these kind of things, and it is their choice. Why do you have to bother and get agitated? I don't understand. I I couldn't make eye contact with them. Oh, I hadn't realized how much that meant to me, even with strangers. But it did, and it still does. That fleeting glimpse, the guessing about another's thoughts and feelings, the recognition when eyes catch and hold. And with these women, it was impossible. Why? Why should you? That is my question, of course. They could see me, if not very clearly, through their veils on the black burqa or the eye holes or on the more traditional white garment, but I could not see them. Why do you want to see them? That is my another question. As far as I was concerned, that made them invisible because there was no possibility of interaction, and that was, of course, the point. The wearing of the garment signaled to everyone to stay away. I did not know what it meant to the women, to their sense of self, their self-esteem. Why the hell do you bother? Why is it your duty? I began to think about what it would mean to live like that. What kind of a society would make people need this particular way of hiding from one another? Parda became a kind of prism, a window into a society that worked only when you turned it to get the best angle, but that yielded many new images once you tried it. Analogies to Parda came to mind, but none really fit. On the streets, I couldn't communicate with people inside cars either. But cars were fast and powerful, which these women were not. I thought about nuns. In those days, all nuns wore habits. But that analogy wasn't right either, even if the costumes had some striking similarities. Nuns announced to the world by their habits that they are not sexual beings but brides of Christ. Parda Nashin were signaling something quite different. In a way, their burqas announced openly that they were sexual beings. For very little girls and very old women, did not wear the garment, even in families where other families did, where other females did. Parda Nashin was signaling something quite different. Oh, it's your perspective. Okay, in a way, their burqas announced openly that they were sexual beings. How can you make this kind of judgment? Who are you and how are you making this judgment? That wearing burqa is an announcement, is an open announcement that they are sexual beings. How the hell can you make this kind of judgment? For very little girls and very old women did not wear the garment, even in families where other females did. I toyed with the interpretation that the burqa so emphasized women's sexuality by trying to hide it, that all other human qualities were obliterated. Certainly, any sense of individuality was erased, at least in public, by the covering of faces. So these crowds of invisible women I saw on the streets of Karachi seemed to be women in general rather than specific individuals, and I knew nothing about what they thought and felt. Why the hell do you care? I don't understand. This is a disease. This is your disease, not theirs. Over the years, I spent time thinking and reading more about Parda, eventually putting these ideas into print. In the late 1970s, an elderly Muslim woman whom I had known for a long time volunteered to tell me about her life. She had grown up in strict Parda. She had grown up in strict Parda, had been married very young, and had finally given up Parda under the strong and persistent pressure of her husband, a civil servant. Oh, wonderful. We talked about her life and mine for many days. From her, I began to learn what it had meant, what it had been like to live in Parda. Okay, so Parda and Muslim identity, the story of Hamida Khala. Right. She was the youngest in a very large Muslim family in North India. Her mother died when she was 3. Her father, a highly educated man, held a post at Aligarh University. Hamida Khala remembered a quite happy childhood. Her father was strict but reasonable. His understanding of Islam emphasized living according to the prescriptions of the Quran, and he did not allow superstitions such as the wearing of amulets in his family. Parda was an important part of his beliefs, and Hamida Khala remembered that she longed to put on the burqa because that would mean she had grown up. Oh, her father wanted all his children, both boys and girls.
Do you know
Sir?
what amulet is? Do you know what amulet is?
Amulets are
Ones which
కంకణం
are
అంటారు కదా సార్.
కంకణం కాదు, అట్లాంటివి మోర్ ఆర్ లెస్.
Right, sir.
కొంచెం హ్యాంగింగ్స్ కూడా ఉంటాయి వాటికి.
Yeah, yeah, sir. Yes, sir. You want to? Okay, I will continue, sir.
Yeah, I'll read. No issues.
No, sir. There's no. What I was I was wondering if there was anything more you wanted to say.
No.
Okay, then I will continue, sir. So her father wanted all his children, both boys and girls, to be well educated. Daily lessons were supervised by adult members of the family. The young Hamida was very close to her father, and recalled how she had wanted to please him by being obedient. Her father remarried, but Hamida's elder sisters, who had brought her up after their mother's death, did not get along with the new wife. Perhaps that is one reason why the family accepted a marriage proposal for Hamida, then only 13, much younger than her sisters had been when they had married. The prospective bridegroom was a widower, much older than Hamida, but known to the family and with a promising job in the civil service. He was said by some relatives to be modern, and there were rumors that he would stop Hamida from observing Parda. She came to her first adult decision. If he asked her to leave Parda, she would return to her family. After that, she felt more confident and consented to the marriage. As was customary, she did not live with her new husband for a couple of years, until she was about 15. His job took them to Calcutta, thousands of miles from her family, and to a small apartment instead of the large house with an open courtyard she had been used to. The trip to Calcutta by train was a nightmare. She heard the voices of men all around her and found it hard to walk in her burqa, even though her husband was beside her. She remembered, I felt helpless. I could do nothing. I wondered, will I really have to take off my burqa? He is a man and he will want me to do whatever he wants. In their new home, she found that the servant her husband had hired was a man. No female servants were to be had. She refused to meet him face to face, true to her training, creating serious problems in running the house. Hamida felt increasing pressure to accommodate her husband's wishes and yet remain true to her father's early training. As a civil servant in colonial India, her husband worked with British, Hindu, and Muslim colleagues. In this sector of colonial society, social life was organized around couples. A married man whose wife could not participate in tea parties and dinners because she was in Parda was at a serious disadvantage because social life and work were closely connected. As long as Hamida's husband had been a bachelor, he was invited freely, but once he was married, his colleagues resented the invisibility of his wife. In the recollections of sorry, in the recollections of former British colonial residents, this theme comes up repeatedly. The greatest social stumbling block between the British and the Indians was Parda. Eh? Because Indian men would be able to mix socially with British wives, while their own wives could not mix with the British. Why should be there any mixing? I don't understand. Whether this curious notion of reciprocity was realistic or simply an excuse for racist snobbery, Abba's husband was clearly affected by these circumstances. She tried to accommodate him by visiting the wives of friends and going for walks with him in her burqa. The climax of young Hamida's struggles over remaining in Parda came unexpectedly at a dinner party in the home of friends where she had visited before. With great emotion, She recalled this event more than 40 years later. They were trying very hard, my husband's friends, that somehow or the other I should come out of Parda. A friend had arranged a dinner. His wife was not in Parda, but because of me, women were arranged to sit separately. The men were always in another room. On this occasion, the time came when we were supposed to go into dinner. All the women went into the dining hall. They were told to sit, leaving one chair empty in between. I thought they were probably expecting some more women. In those times, English times, cards would be put whose seat is for whom. Oh, cards would be put whose seat is for whom. So we sat in the seat with our name. Suddenly the men came into the room. They all sat in all those empty chairs. What I experienced, I just can't tell you. There was darkness all around me. I couldn't see anything. I had tears in my eyes. I was sitting with my eyes downcast. I couldn't look up. I tried to look once at my husband, but he avoided my eyes. I don't know when the dinner was over. What I ate, I don't remember. I was on fire. All my attempts, my endeavors to keep my parda were over. I felt I was without faith. I had sinned. I had gone in front of so many men, all these friends of my husband. They have seen me. My parda was broken. My parda, that was my faith. This is utterly rubbish. On the way home, Hamida's husband explained that he had not planned this party, that he was not at fault. I could never be such a tyrant, he told her, and asked her to forgive and forget. But for a long time, she recalled, I felt that I had sinned that day. How will God forgive me? Then I realized slowly that I would have to change my life. Hamida decided to write to her father to tell him about the struggle she was going through and to ask his advice. He wrote back a long letter telling her that if her marriage might be endangered, then she had to leave Parda. But he added, as she remembered those many years later, that this present Parda is not Islamic, but our men and women have accepted this kind of Parda. Her father also told Hamida that there was no Parda in Europe and that European men did not mind. But Indians who want to follow the European example, Indian Muslims to be more precise, in this, the uh, the author forgot to mention it. But Indian Muslims, I am adding this, but Indian Muslims who want to follow the European example in this respect would have difficulties, he told her, cautioning that our men, it doesn't matter how liberated they think they will not endure it that their wife will talk or be informal with other men. From now on, you should always go out with your husband. Don't meet his friends alone without him, and don't be informal with them. This letter consoled her, but she was not fully satisfied. On her own, she started reading about Parda and sought out passages in the Quran and Hadith that were about women. At that time, early in her married life, and before she was 20 years old, she worked out for herself the rules of modest dress and demeanor that she would follow for the rest of her life. I realized that if you go out without makeup and if you are not wearing a dress that will attract attention, she recalled, then you can go out. Hamida started wearing long sleeved blouses and gave up all her makeup and jewelry. She mixed very little and often did not recognize her husband's friends and colleagues because she kept her eyes down in their presence. She no longer wore the burqa and went for long walks with her husband, rejoicing in her greater physical agility and strength. She still took the burqa with her on trips just in case, even though she did not wear it. But on one memorable train journey, her husband angrily threw it out of the window and she never had another one made. She learned to manage things like bank accounts and dealt with officials on her own at her husband's insistence. When he died of a heart attack, while some of their 7 children were still young, she was able to manage the household. She felt sure she could not have done it if she had stayed in Parda, and pitied Parda Nasheen who were forced by circumstances to try managing on their own. In retrospect, Hamida Khala recalled that it was a big sacrifice for me to leave Parda, but my husband had a lot of respect for me. He knew that it was part of my religion and still I left it. We learned a lot from each other. Her views on Parda could be summed up in 3 sentences, and there were many people in Pakistan who felt the same way, at least in the 1960s and 70s. The real Parda is modesty, which is haya in Urdu, I think. If a woman has no modesty, then even in a burqa, she is not in Parda. If she has modesty, she is in Parda even without burqa. Oh, but Hamida went further. Oh, I will repeat this sentence. The real Parda is modesty, which is haya. If a woman has no modesty, then even in a burqa, she is not in Parda. If she has modesty, she is in Parda even without burqa. That's what her inference was. But Hamida went further. With evident delight, she recounted that a man from a very conservative group had come to call on her one day, knowing she had been in Parda and was the widow of an important man, to solicit her support for bringing back widespread Parda in Pakistan. He spoke to her of the harm that would be done to the country if women did not wear burqas. She smiled at the memory of what she told him. Let 1,000 women come out at once, not just a few. Then you will see how quickly men get used to seeing women and thinking nothing of it. She had come out of Parda herself, after all, and had kept her modesty, she added, and that was what mattered. I do not know whether the life of Hamida Khala is unusual or typical, even for her generation and class. But her story showed me how deeply the values and rules of Parda are embedded in a person's life. Leaving Parda was not as easy as I had perhaps imagined. It was not a matter of throwing off the burqa like an overcoat in spring. Hamida Khala's story of growth and change can be seen as her struggle to define a Muslim identity for herself at a time when conflicting pressures from past and present, father and husband, made things hard for her.
Oh,
Famidabi, sir.
I'm liking it.
Yes, sir.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll continue, sir.
Yeah. What's the page number, by the way?
Famida, 89, sir, in the
89 కదా?
PDF. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
PDF number. Famidabi, the Muslim Union organizer. Perhaps I was wrong. Not all changes were as dramatic or as difficult as Hamida Khala's. In 1985, a friend told me another true story about Famidabi, an organizer in the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEVA, a trade union of very poor women in India. Famidabi had told the story herself at a SEVA convention. Famidabi was the elected head of the SEVA group in Bhopal, organized by the women who earn low piecework wages rolling country cigarettes, which are colloquially called BDs. Her home was a couple of rooms in a slum where she lived with her family. As a Muslim, Famidabi observed parda and wore a burqa, as was customary among Muslims in Bhopal. Being in parda was probably one reason she worked in a home industry, BD making. When the invitation came to attend the regional Seva meeting, Famidabi reluctantly agreed to the request of other union members that she go, but insisted that another woman travel with her. On the way to the railway station, with her son carrying her bag, as she later told the conference group, some of the women from her union called out to her, "And will you make revolution? And will you make revolution wearing a burqa?" Famidabi turned around, went home, and came back without the burqa. Even though even though she saw from her son's behavior that he did not approve. She told the conference, "I felt they had chosen me and I should go by their advice." But looking at her disapproving son from the train window, she had wondered, "Have I done something bad?" She consoled herself by thinking that her, her son would not be so shocked later when his wife or daughter also threw away her burqa. Another woman stood up at the conference and told of her advice to another group of Muslim women BD workers. "You must leave your parda. You are not even getting the benefit of a minimum wage regulations because you won't go yourselves to deal with the middlemen. You send your children. You deserve to be paid less." Famidabi and Hamida Khala stand at almost the opposite ends of the social and economic spectrum. Although Famidabi is not among the poorest of the poor, and Hamida Khala not among the wealthy or the most sophisticated. Their stories show how Parda functions at these different points in society and, of course, in time. Famidabi acted in the 1980s, and most of Hamida Khala's struggles came in the 1920s and 1930s. For Hamida Khala, earning an income from a job was neither an option nor a necessity. For Famidabi, it was both. In both cases, Parda observance was tied up with religious feelings and with the respect accorded by others in the community. But the actions the two women were able to take reflected the differences in their circumstances. Projections of Parda, implications for social order. Rokeya Sakhawat Hossain was not the first writer to describe Parda in South Asia, nor the first to oppose it. But I know of none to equal the ferocity of her accounts, and of only a few who also translated their concern into action. For the most part of those who have written about Parda, outsider accounts tend to be critical and the insiders to adopt a moralistic tone. For non-Asian observers, Parda is usually as unique as it was for me, and it colors other perceptions of Asia. For those who have grown up in Parda observing environments, it is often so unremarkable as to remain unmentioned except by moralists. In the early 19th century, an English woman married to an Indian Muslim of high status wrote one of the earliest accounts of life in urban zenanas, to which she had access through her husband's family connections. She was clearly fascinated by meeting women in seclusion, but enjoyed her conversations with men more, especially those about comparative religion. Her attitude toward the woman was one of kindly condescension, and she was a bit ambivalent about Indian customs, although much more tolerant than many English residents who came to India later. Mrs. Mir Hassan Ali's accounts make it possible to trace some of the changes and similarities in Parda practices in North India. For example, she makes no mention of anyone wearing a burqa or even knowing about it. This supports a view of Parda as an unstable institution. Nearly a century later, a very difficult account of Parda was written by another foreign observer, Catherine Mayo. Aha, Catherine Mayo had an overriding political purpose to
Sanjay, I would like.
ridicule in, sir.
You want me to
I
read?
will I will complete this part and next paragraph.
Okay.
Yes, Catherine Mayo. I mean, next headline, from next headline you can start. Catherine Mayo had an overriding political purpose to ridicule Indian aspirations for national independence by writing a sensational account purportedly exposing issues relating to women, family life, sexuality, and seclusion. Her highly moralistic account focuses on Parda, which she calls life in imprisonment within the four walls of the home and early marriage. In a typical passage, she writes that Indians suffered from undeniable race deterioration brought on by sexual indulgence, which made their hands too weak, too fluttering to seize or hold the reins of government. At the age when the Anglo-Saxon is just coming into full glory of manhood. Although Mayo's account has been praised by modern feminist writers, her obvious political purposes and her racism make her a very unreliable witness. Wonderful. The tone of Mayo's book on Indian society is remarkably similar, however, to some equally moralistic accounts of other societies by those South Asians who urged that Parda must be retained to prevent moral chaos. One of the most prominent Muslim writers to support Parda was Abul Ala Maududi, whose works have achieved wide circulation not only in South Asia but in many other parts of the world. Maududi's work on Parda first appeared in 1939. An English version was published in Pakistan in 1972 as Parda and the Status of Women in Islam. Maududi's dualistic view of humanity is expressed as follows. All actions that take place in the world cannot take place unless there exists a passive partner for every active partner. And the passive partner possesses the qualities of yielding and surrendering. The imagery of the male as a cultivator and the female as his field is common among Muslims and recurs often in Maududi's books. And although Like many other writers of authoritative works, he takes the position that he is merely writing obvious common sense with which no reasonable person could possibly agree. Maududi does add the following disclaimer: activity in itself is naturally superior to passivity and femininity. This superiority is not due to any merit in masculinity against any demerit in femininity. If such statements sound familiar to Western readers, it is because the same type of dualism has been deeply embedded in the Judeo-Christian tradition since its earliest days. In the terms I have used in this essay, claims for women's special nature also reflect the dualistic philosophical tradition. They are they are directly relevant to the contemporary challenges presented by revivalist movements that stress a dualistic woman and men. Feminist theologians have been critical of the dualistic tradition in the Judeo-Christian heritage for some time. According to Rosemary Ruther's analysis, for example, St. Augustine equated the dualism of body and soul with the dualism of male and female. Thus, the spiritual image of God in man became essentially male, and femaleness was equated with the lower corporeal nature. More recent arguments have been advanced with respect to the same kind of dualism within Islam. The Muslim feminist theologian Rifat Hassan argues that dualism found its way into Islam from the Judeo-Christian tradition by way of the commentaries on the Quran, even though this type of dualism appears to be alien to the Quran itself. Hassan also notes that woman's body is seen as her essence through the association of mind or body dualism with male or female distinctions. It is ironic to consider that the dualistic conception may be a legacy from Judeo-Christian heritage, when it is precisely this heritage from which the new Islamic movements are trying to distance themselves at the present time. Maududi's views about women did not go unchallenged. For instance, in the early 1970s, a male Pakistani writer devoted a whole book to the analysis of Parda because he was convinced that the questions of Parda and polygamy are fundamentally the questions of hindrances to the progress and development of the Muslim society, civilization, and culture. This view was widely shared at the time, especially in urban areas. More recently, however, things have changed in a number of countries with large Muslim populations with regard to the position of women. The views of powerful social and political movements have influenced a number of governments to enforce policies that ensure the support of these movements at the expense of women. To take Pakistan as an example, although it is by no means the only country where this has happened, government directives made it clear beginning in the 1980 that rights previously taken for granted would now be sharply limited or even withdrawn altogether. Super. It began with orders to government employees to wear Islamic dress at work. This also applied to educational institutions. These directives were widely disregarded, but they encouraged the more zealous to implement their subjective code of dress on women, whom they saw in public places. The policies were, at first, presented in terms of encouraging people to follow their own cultural norms and reject Western patterns. But critics soon argued that women were forced to adhere to codes of conduct and dress which for men are considered antiquated, and of placing restrictions on the female half of the population exclusively. In short, the revival of Parda norms was the beginning of widespread attempts to limit the rights of women and enforce the segregation of women and men. Women responded with protests and demonstrations organized by both existing and newly mobilized groups, but they were unable to prevent the enactment of legislation that sharply limited women's legal rights. Right, sir. I think, will you take, sir? Shravan, sir?
Wonderful. Yes, I will do it. Thanks for reading. Next, sexuality and the fear of social chaos. Proponents of Parda are often explicit in their fears of the consequences of sexual attraction between women and men. They insist that the only most stringent controls over male-female interaction will preserve a society from what they see as moral chaos. As stated by Maududi, sexual attraction which naturally exists between sexes has sexual attraction which naturally exists between sexes as a strong instinctive urge becomes all too powerful, even rebellious, to transgress all the limits with every impetus. It recedes on the free intermingling of the men and women. In support of stringent sex segregation, proponents of the Parda often recount examples of unusual sexual practices, prostitution, divorce, pornography in the Western countries. These accounts are taken from newspapers and magazines, particularly those with large international circulations, and are described as a typical of everyday life. Maududi, whose works are important to note because they have been widely distributed, cites many such accounts, especially in writing of the national suicide of Western countries, especially France, England, and the United States, which he attributes to the logical consequences of the movement which has initiated in the beginning of the 19th century for the rights and emancipation of the women. Similar calls for a return to the good old days when the imagined social controls were strict is also common among the fundamentals of the Judeo-Christian tradition. But a preoccupation with the sexuality among Muslims may need to be seen from another angle as well. According to some recent Muslim feminist writers, the association between the sexual attraction and female positivity raises important questions about men and women in the Muslim societies. Why are the silence, immobility, and obedience the key criteria of female beauty in the Muslim society where I live and work? Asked Fatna Sabah, the pseudonymous author. So, Shiksha, see, some wonderful questions, right?
Wonderful, sir.
Obedience. Such
Yes,
a
sir.
good
Yes.
questions. The pseudonymous author, a Muslim woman of the woman in the Muslim unconscious. So this seems to be something. Women are the Muslim unconscious. So is there a book like this? Okay, let us see. Why, according to the canons of beauty in Islamic literature, does a woman who does not express herself in excite desire in a man? Although this is a large and controversial issue that needs more careful discussion among Muslims than it has so far received. A peculiarly appropriate comment on the Sabbath's questions comes from Leela Abu Lughod's interpretation of honor and wailing among Egyptians Bedouins. Sexuality is the most potent threat of the patrilineal, patri-centered system. See, two words, Siksha, super. Patrilineal and patri-centered system.
Sir, without these patri suffixed, prefixed words,
Yes.
a feminist book will not be complete, sir.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And so that means that the patri or the father is of no use. That is what they see.
Exactly, sir.
He's an idiot who has to keep his mouth shut, whatever irrespective of
Exactly,
what
sir.
his women do. So that is
No,
what
no, sir.
these people feel.
First
Yeah.
they label it, and
Ah,
they try to impose it as an evil, and then they will try to crush things.
yes, exactly. Vishwasa is writing. Men and women seem to be integrated in the modern society but segregated inside modern homes. Quite ironic. Yes, sir. It is quite ironic. I agree to the fullest extent. There is not one iota of false this, statement. Do you think anything is there, Shiksha?
Nothing, sir. Absolute.
Seriously. Anyway, the idiot father is one thing we have to understand, right?
Yes, sir.
He's called a
They
great lad.
want. Yes, yes, sir. Basically, sir,
Father,
they what they want is people to be separated. They should not be united. Divide. First, they want to divide among classes, among genders, every other yeah, every other
Patrimecia.
unity. Sir,
There's another word Vishwakar said. Patrimecia has been the pillar of all versions of feminism except feminism 1.0. Oh,
sir, I think you should pin the StreamYard link, sir.
oh, okay. But no one is there now. Vishwakar can come directly. Vasulya
Oh,
was
okay,
there
all
a few
right.
minutes back. I don't know if he's there later. Okay, anyway, I'll paste it over chat.
Anyway, the book is also about to get complete.
Yeah, no.
Two more 3 pages.
Mhm. Okay. What I'll do is I'll continue reading the rest of the
Yeah,
pages
yeah,
that we can
right,
discuss.
sir.
So, sexuality is the most potent threat to the patrilinear and patri-centered system and to the authority of those who upheld it. And the women are the most closely identified with sexuality through their reproductive activities. Therefore, to show respect for that social order and the people who represent it, women must deny their sexuality. They do so by denying sexual interest, avoiding and acting uninterested in men, dressing modestly so as to not draw attention to their sexual charms and feeling. So, what this feminist in this book think, so what they should do is the modesty is not the key to a woman. They can just happily open and then look towards other men and be whatever they want to be. Maybe that is there.
Exactly, sir.
Maybe.
Exactly, sir.
I think so. Right? So,
This is a highlight of the book, sir. This line, "Women must deny their sexuality," is
very good.
the highlight of this book. Utter.
Dinner.
I mean, this is the conclusion. We're at the end of the book, so these are the conclusions this author is trying to give to the yeah.
This interpretation is consistent with the same author's depiction of the honor of the voluntary defense as the moral virtue of the dependents, which I discussed earlier. Stated in the terms used in that society, these are the ideas that underlie and reinforce the view of sexuality as a source of anarchy in an otherwise ordered society, and an anarchy that lies close enough to the surface to require constant watchfulness and control. Wonderful. Beyond the psychological and symbolic significance of these concepts of women and sexuality, there is also the concrete material base of patrilinear and patriarchal societies that deeply affects both sexuality and reproduction. Among Muslims, for example, the legitimacy of children is of major importance in preserving the sense of order in a society and controlling the inheritance of property. So, therefore, the legitimacy of the children is not important.
Oh,
Diksha garu,
Sir,
Please understand. You are not understanding.
right,
Yes.
sir. Now,
Ah.
I got it late, very late.
Hmm.
What
Legitimacy is
is
a
this, sir?
major issue. It's again further. Legitimacy is a major issue in Muslim personal law, particularly in connection with the regulation of marriage and divorce and in the inheritance of property. See?
Right, sir.
Hmm. Super duper hit.
Super hit, sir.
Sexuality poses a concrete threat to the social order because mutual attraction may upset careful paternal plans for future marriage alliance. Since the Muslim can legally inherit property under the Muslim personal law, even though if they do not always receive what they are entitled to, the property inherited by a daughter can potentially leave control of the patriarchal lineage. This is one factor in the preference for marriage arrangements with the paternal kin, especially between the children of brothers who may jointly control family property. Sexuality, in short, has a legitimate place only in family life. Wonderful. So, sexuality has a legitimate place only in family life. Super.
Super, sir.
Ah, legitimacy be damned, Vishwagaru. Yes, sir, it has to be damned. I agree. I am turning a feminist after reading this book.
Super, sir.
Hmm. Further on the natural rights of women. At the end, I return to the beginning. So she is again reiterating what she has already said. So she is going
Right,
in a
sir.
cycle like order. To Rokeya's message
Right.
to their readers to wake up to their self-interest and to regain their natural rights. To my mind, this is the real significance of her story and of her all her later work. Parda must be seen as I think she saw it. Oh, she is telling Parda how it has to be looked at. Okay. Not simply as a matter of
Mm.
veiling or not veiling female faces, but as a way of putting half of the population at a disadvantage in dealing with the world. So they think Muslims have half of their constitute half of the world, but nonsense. It never had it. It happened at all. Nor it's going to be. In Sultana's dream, Rokeya stood Parda on its head, shocking her readers and revealing through the reverse Pardara many of the implications of sex segregation. Reverse Parda was at least imaginable to Rokeya's readers in a ways that world completely without men, like Charlotte Pickens, Gilman's Herland, or an egalitarian world might have not been. Sorry, ఏంటిది? ఏం చదువుతున్నాను? Nonsense.
Egalitarian world might
No,
not
no, no,
have
it's not.
been.
Oh, or an egalitarian world might not have been. Okay.
Yes,
Rokeya
sir.
was not as explicit as she might have been about the cruel consequences of confinement for the men of Ladyland, concentrating attention instead of what life in Ladyland meant to previously confined women. Beyond its shock value, Rokeya's story directly challenges the ideas by which her readers had been taught to live in a family and society. This challenge took two main forms: a call for women to reconsider their self interest and demonstration of women's competence in the world outside home. The concept of self interest that was instilled in South Asian women in Rokeya's time and that still prevails today among many people. It is not that an independent individual, but of the member of a family whose collective interests determine the actions of the individuals. In this view, there is very little room for the natural rights that Rokia may have had in mind in Sultana's dream, where women's interests are so tightly bound up with the interest of the family. It is hard to imagine a woman acting against the family's interests. But Rokia, the rebel and reformer, was also a product of this environment. And who can say whether there were not others like her? The life histories women tell these days about their mothers, grandmothers, and aunts suggest that streams of resentment and muted rebellion run deep in some unexpected places. If there were other Rokias, we will perhaps learn about them from their life histories now being talked about and written down all over South Asia, and they will be worth waiting for. Wonderful, wonderful.
Super,
Ah,
sir. Ha, ha,
wonderful,
ha,
wonderful. The book is a super duper hit book. And with this, we conclude this book. So, Vishwagar is posing a question to us. Simple question: will a modern feminist allow her male child, bracket, if she has one, to be married to a modern feminist? I don't think so. To be precise, this is my opinion. Siksha, what about you? Do you think it happens?
Sir, actually, I too have the same feeling, sir. But since I am not a female or neither a feminist, I don't want to give opinion, sir.
No,
But
no. You are
I,
mistaken. You
uh,
can, you need not be a female, but you can be a feminist.
I know, sir. Yeah, sir. I have one more doubt, sir. Okay, first let's. I will answer. I will give my opinion about this was our question, sir. I too have the same opinion that the modern feminists would not give their uh, male child to a modern feminist. 100% I'm sure of it, sir.
Why not?
Why not? Because they don't want their child to suffer as as her husband has suffered, or her uh, 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 mother-in-law has suffered because of her, or father-in-law has suffered because of her, or her husband has suffered because of her. She would definitely try to uh, get a woman from a very conservative family. This is my opinion, sir.
Wonderful.
And because, sir, I have one doubt, sir. After reading all the book, in the right now you have said that you don't have to be a female to be a feminist, right, sir?
Absolutely.
So, what they say is feminism, sir. What do they mean by feminism? Actually, in general
I
perception,
don't know. You have to tell me because you read the most of the book.
I read it, sir. But
You turn to
uh,
explain me.
actually, sir, in general perception, not going with the dictionary meaning. I don't know what the dictionary meaning is. Most women say what feminism is gender equality, right, sir? Sir, I wonder.
Here it doesn't
Sir,
say equality. It says we are superior.
no, sir. I have a question regarding this. I will ask you. Uh, why is feminism gender equality and not masculinism gender equality? Why don't we consider masculinism as gender equality? Who wrote this definition as that feminism is gender equality?
I have no
Who wrote
clue.
this?
You have to tell me.
Today, this morning, I got this doubt, sir.
Uh-huh.
This very morning, I got this doubt when I was thinking about this feminism and all. When I was thinking about this feminism, why is it the meaning of in general perception? If you ask any feminist or any woman, what is the meaning of feminism? They will just say gender equality. Who told feminism is equal to gender equality? Why didn't they say masculinism is equal to gender equality? Who are giving these definitions, or who are who are those that are running these narratives that feminism means gender equality?
We can do
And
one
why
thing.
add
Do one thing.
no sir, why add the prefix femininity to gender equality? How can they say? How can they add one gender to an ism and call it gender equality? How is it possible, sir?
That's the
There,
beauty.
there should be
Nobody
at
has
least
the
a
answer.
neutral term, sir.
Nobody has an answer.
Exactly. So all these narratives they have blinded the common people, and they have been running all these stupid narratives and uh, making people blind and idiots, sir, and suffocating people's lives. They are dictating terms.
I
All those,
agree to an extent.
sir,
I have to agree to an extent.
sir, sir, please observe yourself, sir. They are adding one gender as a prefix to an ism, one gender,
Hmm.
and they are saying it is gender equality. That
Yes,
itself is a hypocrisy,
exactly.
right, sir? That itself is a hypocrisy. You
Absolutely.
are omitting one particular gender as a whole, and you are adding only one gender to an ism, and you are saying it is gender equality.
Yes, sir.
That is the beauty of hypocrisy, sir.
I agree.
Hypocrisy at its peak,
That is okay.
sir.
Hypocrisy at its place. Now, what is
Sir.
that they are going to achieve by doing this? What is the end result?
The end result is chaos in the society, sir. That's all.
Exactly.
Chaos in the
Exactly.
society, and by this chaos, through this chaos, they will earn lots of money and lead lavish life.
And
All
there are a
those
lot of
who,
people. There are a lot of people who are no very good funding this. Is that what you're trying to say?
of course, sir, this has been happening since I think hundreds of years.
Hmm. Exactly.
They
Hmm.
are introducing all these isms and ists into society,
Hmm.
uh, but breaking up wholesome communities, wholesome societies, and they are breaking up families. They are breaking up every other uh, unions as a whole, and they are enjoying. Uh, they are enjoying all the fruits of what these people are losing.
Exactly.
That's it, sir. So my inference, sir, is all these came from atheism, sir. The base root of all these isms and ists,
The originality is the
uh,
communism.
communism. No,
Hmm.
the root of communism is also atheism, sir. Right, sir?
No, the root of atheism is communism.
Atheism is communism. Okay. However,
Hmm. So anyway, let us conclude this
yes, sir.
session. Discuss it somewhere else again.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right,
So
sir.
viewers, thank you for being here. Thanks, Iksha, for reading the wonderful, fantastic book, the most of it. Thank you, Ishwagaru and Vachalya, for commenting. So with this, we conclude this book, Sultana's Dream, a Feminist Utopia, written by Rokeya Sakhawat Hossain. And then going forward, we'll have another book or a discussion at hand with the same or similar subject. So thank you, one and all.